who she is, what she does as a student at NAU. And she's also one of our presenters. So she's going to go ahead and do that. And then we'll go on from there. Thank you everyone for being here. We have a really good crowd, I think. And thank you for city staff for being here, and also anybody from the community for being here. Really appreciate your time, and your time is precious. I understand that. And I just want to really give you a heartfelt thank you for your presence with us. Taylor, if you're ready, can you go ahead and turn on your camera and offer your prayer?
Yeah, hi, I'm at the library right now, so can you guys hear me okay? Okay. So I'll do an introduction a little bit later when we get into presenting, but yes, Yad Bene, Happy Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm Kaylee Arvizu, and I use Indigenous Ambassador like Rose introduced me. So real quick so we can get started, I'll be doing a prayer in a hybrid of Navajo and English so that everybody can understand. So if you could please, bow your heads, close your eyes, do whatever you're comfortable with. Get started. Kudo hujol dolesh, nasan shema yarish shita, hayos kash, nahodik ish, nahatsui chahashesh, zishtati indo, sisna jinitso zistok osli, the bensa, dishna dishlich olne, shiche hasht elte, shiche hasht ehorn, yolskayasa shema, san alehi shema, the Indigenous ancestors, thank you for allowing us to gather today. I hope that we are able to get our thoughts out clearly and let our minds be clear today, and also let us help us recover from these sensitive topics that we're going to be going over today. Please let everybody who's in this meeting continue to do well with their work or in school. Please allow them to be able to celebrate today however they want, to be able to get home safely afterwards. Are sa'ana epik hojo, hojana hasli, hojana hasli, hojana hasli, hojana hasli.
Yeah, Kaylee, I really appreciate your words and the words in your prayer this morning, this brand new day that's never been used. We say we'll have many blessings today as we go through this day, as long as we honor ourselves, who we are, and honor the people, our neighbors, our relatives around us. I think that's the way that we try to teach our young ones as we go forward each day. So I'm gonna go ahead and just make an acknowledge about what Indigenous Day means to us through these presentations. And I wish everybody here online with us happy Indigenous Day. Also want to go on and have our land acknowledgement, which I will have here. The land acknowledgement that we worked on with the Indigenous Commission for the City of Flagstaff and leadership, as well as having it be approved by City Council to be utilized in with different departments, as well as all their meetings here at City Hall, is greatly appreciated. And all the prayers and thoughts that went into this has been very much has been a blessing to our community. So though we all understand that many times land acknowledgement is just one step, but a foundational step as to how we can all work together as relatives within a community. The Flagstaff City Council humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands of this area's Indigenous nations and original stewards. These lands, still inhabited by Native descendants, border mountains sacred to Indigenous people. We honor them, their legacies, their traditions, and their continued contributions. We celebrate their past, their present, and future generations who will forever know this place as home. I want to leave you with that thought and welcome again. And I'd like to go ahead and turn the time over to our mayor, Paul Deasy. Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you, Rose, and thank you, Kaylee, for the opening prayer. It's my honor to read the proclamation for Indigenous Peoples Day this year. City of Flagstaff recognizes that it's built on lands known, inhabited, loved, and respected by Indigenous people since time immemorial. The City of Flagstaff was built and is still energized and maintained and shaped today with Indigenous people's knowledge, labor, technology, science, philosophy, arts, and commerce. Advocating for and supporting for City Council goals and objectives for 2017 through 2022. The City of Flagstaff understands that government entities, organizations, and public institutions have a responsibility to enact policies for racism and to build justice and equity for Indigenous people and all people who suffer from the effects of prejudice and discrimination. The observance of Columbus Day is a celebration of assimilation, acculturation, and genocide against Indigenous peoples. To this end, city officials and residents throughout Flagstaff and the surrounding areas participated in 2016 and 2017 in a series of Indigenous community forums to hear the concerns and ideas of Indigenous people and adopted the strategy and recommendations that came from these forums. City of Flagstaff resolved in 2018 to support efforts to educate the public about historic and contemporary Indigenous human rights concerns and to honor its Indigenous roots by becoming a better steward of the land it is built upon. City of Flagstaff, mayor, and council members hereby recognize and renew the commitment between the City of Flagstaff and the Indigenous nations and communities of Northern Arizona to work together for the benefit of all. Now, therefore, I, Paul Deasy, Mayor of the City of Flagstaff, do hereby proclaim October 10th, 2022 as Indigenous Peoples Day. Thank you, and I look forward to the day's discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that time and also for you being here. I really appreciate that. We all do. I know that there's a lot of city staff on here and as well as community members. So taking that time to be with us, we appreciate that. I'd like to go ahead and I know that Clara, I had received an email from you regarding President Nez. Is that, is he present?
I do not see him on Ms. Tully, but he might join a little bit. He also, I believe, is here in Flagstaff, so he may be wanting to come to the in-person event, but I will keep an eye out for him. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that information. I appreciate it. So we're going to go ahead and go to the next one where McKaylee as well as Kaylee will introduce themselves before their presentation at 9. We might have to take a little break before their presentation. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves, what you've been involved with, so that our audience can begin to know who you are and just what kinds of things you are planning for your future. And I really appreciate that as well. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us today. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you. My name is McKaylee Steen. I'm an enrolled member of the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma, which is still very much home to me, but I'm currently a graduate student. I'm a PhD candidate at UC Berkeley in the Environmental Science Policy and Management Department. I have been very involved with ASIS, which is the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. I'm really passionate about promoting Indigenous youth seeing themselves in STEM careers, and am passionate about being a Native woman in the STEM field myself. I also focus on environmental justice, as well as looking at cases of land back, essentially where tribes have been able to reacquire land within their traditional territories, and the impacts that that has on the environment pre and post that sort of management change. And so I'm going to talk today a little bit about those topics of environmental justice and Indigenous access to lands and why that is so important on a lot of different levels. So looking forward to talking more about that, and I'll pass it over to Kaylee.
Okay, yat she Kaylee Jordan Arvizu Inisha, not what in a touchy Ninishlen, na kay bashish jeans, na Jenny Dashichi, na kay Rashanale, Fortines Desidet, na Shado, na Din Shanahe. So hello, I'm Kaylee. I am red running into the water, and my maternal grandpa is Blackstreak Wood People, while my paternal heritage is Hispanic and Latino. I am from Tuba City, Arizona, which is on the Navajo Nation. I was just there for the fair, Western Navajo Fair, if any of you went. I'm 21. I'm a fourth year student at NAU. I'm a social work major with a minor in community engagement, and I am the Indigenous ambassador for the year 2022. And I'm also the first person to hold that title, as it used to be called the Miss Indigenous NAU. But we changed it so that it would be more inclusive of all genders, so that anybody could run for this title. Which is, really, it's such an honor to be able to be the first person to hold it. We're really trying to move tribal royalty away from just being like a figurehead or a token spokesperson for universities to use or cities to use, just to say whatever. And we want them to be positions of leadership where they can actually have platforms and accomplish change. And that's what me and my co-ambassador have been working towards during this time. So right now, my biggest project is working on bringing an Indigenous community garden / ethnobotanical garden to NAU for its students to get reconnected with their culture and their language, and to learn how to cultivate their own food and traditional plant medicines and stuff like that. Yeah, but I also do a lot of volunteer work with like NACA or anything on campus. Just very big on being like on advocacy and activism and stuff like that. So thank you for having me here today. I'm excited to get to present to you all.
Thanks again, Kaylee and McKaylee. These young ladies are not by any way coincidental. I think they're very much connected, especially by their names, no matter how far apart they are. So I'm just really honored to have them with us, especially with our agenda in honoring the voices of our youth. I think sometimes it's really hard to have our young people say things and speak things and share things with us when they are brought up to really look up to their elders and to have space for their elders. And so sometimes it's not as easy for them to say, I have things to share. Can I, take some of your time? And so we wanted to make the space for them because we also need to really hear what's on their hearts, things that they've gained from Western education, but also from their traditional fireplaces. How do they put them together, and how can we turn to them to help with some of these issues that it seems to be really hard for the current generation to solve, So I think that listening to especially our Indigenous youth is very important because they do have a lot of indigenous knowledge that is so much needed around the globe. So giving the space is only a fraction of what we can do for them. So I hope that everybody will give them, our youth, more time as they do their work in their everyday work of life, especially when we're, um, especially those that are in leadership positions and who can really provide the time and space for our youth. So, and I also want to apologize for my dog. She's kind of running back and forth. When she hears voices, she kind of jumps up and starts crawling. So if you hear her, that's the reason why she's doing that. Okay, so we're gonna just give a little bit of time just to maybe have a break before we start at right at 9 o'clock. And then for those who don't know, the rest of once this session is over, the session at 11 o'clock is going to be in person only from 11 to 12. We have two groups of youth panels who are going to address topics that are important to them, and Commissioner Marks is going to be the one taking care of those groups. And then at 12, Commissioner Toya and her helpers are going to serve a meal. And then at 1 o'clock, there are going to be two performances, the Hopi group and an Aztec group, who are also on a journey to advocating for their youth as well as Indigenous people. So they're going to talk about that and also including their performances. So I hope that you'll be out there to join them. And thank you for all our city staff that are helping a lot of last minute things, and I so much appreciate your help. You just don't know how much it means to me for you to just jump in and help me today. And so if we're going to go ahead and we'll have a few minutes to have a break, and then we'll start right at 9 again. Okay, so stay on this site. This is the site for both this session and the 9 o'clock session. Thank you.
Good morning, Rose. Can you hear me? I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Yes, I can hear you very
Hi.
clearly. Oh, yeah.
It's Linda Curley.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I have a day off from my other job, so I decided to join you guys. I was
Aw,
trying to remember what day was it? That Wear Orange Day.
that was the last day of September.
Oh, goodness, completely forgot. I couldn't remember. Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll be here. And then at 11:30 is when the in-person one starts, right?
11.
Oh, 11. Okay.
Mhm.
All
I should,
right.
I should share that just in case.
Yeah. It looks like
Well,
we have a lot of participants.
yeah, we have a lot of people here. I'm so
Mhm.
thankful for our presenters.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. I just dropped off my daughter at school and then logged in with you guys, so I'll be here in town.
Oh, yeah.
Hmm. So did you get to go to the parade?
No, I was
Oh.
in Palm Springs this
Oh,
weekend.
okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Our daughter was running in Glendale on Saturday, and then she performed at the homecoming game Friday night. So we were busy with that.
Mm,
So we didn't make it out to Tuba at all,
yeah. Yeah.
which was kind of nice because traffic was crazy.
Yeah.
Going home Saturday night, the traffic was backed up all the way by the old Vans Trading Post.
Linda,
Uh-huh.
I need to have our presenter start now. So,
Okay. Okay.
all right.
Talk
Thank
to you later.
you. All right. Take it away. Our two heroes here. Sheroes.
I love that. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. We do have a little bit of a presentation. Can you all see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. OCO, hello everyone. I will introduce myself again in a second for anybody else that came on, but thank you so much for having us as speakers today. I'll ask that we hold any questions until the end, but if there's anything pressing, please feel free to drop it in the chat. But until then, we're going to introduce ourselves first. So my name is McKaylee Steen. I'm a PhD candidate at UC Berkeley in the Environmental Science Policy and Management Department, and I'm a member of the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma.
And I'm Keely Arvizu. I'm Natodana Tachini, Nakai Bashishins, Nanjini Dashitena Kairashinale. I'm Dene from Tuba City. I'm NAU's current Indigenous Ambassador, a title formerly known as Miss Indigenous NAU. I'm a fourth year student at NAU studying social work and community engagement.
Awesome. So today I'm going to talk first, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Indigenous impacts on landscapes and the importance of access to land for us, as well as a little bit about the land back movement. And then Kaylee's going to speak second about some actions around Flagstaff and how to support Indigenous people in that way. So I'm going to start us off first by taking a really broad look at Indigenous people and climate change within a global context, and we'll get a little bit more local. But really, Indigenous people are kind of threatened on two fronts, and one of those is the loss of land base and cultural ties, both from the dispossession of our land due to colonization and throughout time, and then also environmental factors. So as we're facing more threats of sea level rise, increased wildfires, extreme drought, things like that are also threatening our relationship with the land base. And along with that loss comes this loss of knowledge. We harbor knowledge that comes from deep and meaningful and lasting connections to a landscape that has existed since time immemorial. Our people have been impacting these landscapes and have lived within our traditional territories for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And so the impacts of climate change on our existence is really, really impactful. But Indigenous people also have a really important impact on the landscape. So worldwide, almost 370 million people identify themselves as Indigenous, and though that makes up only a fraction of the global population, Indigenous people manage or hold tenure over 25% of land surface and support 80% of global biodiversity. This makes Indigenous people a really key group in achieving our ambitious conservation and climate change goals. Indigenous people are, as I've already mentioned, on the front lines of facing the effects of climate change. Our presence is really important in regions that are really important for biodiversity and carbon storage. And this is really from the Arctic to the Amazons, all across the globe. Indigenous people are facing these effects, especially in tropical regions as well. These are just a few links, and I'm happy to share these slides as well. These are just a few links and articles that I've pulled from. I'm also going to highlight different articles throughout my portion of the talk. I'm an academic, so I like to pull in some data and things like that. But I also like to highlight that as much as we're on the front lines of facing the challenges of climate change, we are also on the front lines of coming up with solutions. So there are tribes that are involved with carbon offsets. So the way that we manage our forests can be really beneficial to carbon storage. Energy innovations, such as making the shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy like wind or solar. And then tireless advocacy work I highlight here, the action against Line 3. There's been so many protests and actions against pipelines. And this action also ties in with our epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women. There are oftentimes clusters where that's happening more, and often that happens around some of these sites where pipeline work is taking place. So anytime that we are coming up with solutions or doing advocacy work, it's not just for one sphere or one impact, it's for across the board. We're seeing impacts for our people. And so now I'm going to talk about Indigenous land management and the important benefits and challenges that we have there. So Indigenous land stewardship has really important implications for species diversity, ecosystem services, healthy forest, and ecocultural restoration. I like to think of ecocultural restoration as we're not just restoring a landscape or improving a forest or biodiversity, but we're also improving our cultural relationship with those places as well. These are a couple of articles that highlight vertebrate biodiversity as well as ecological outcomes for forest and wildlife stewardship, both globally and then within the US. So there are people, studying this and have really interesting outcomes here. But I want to highlight one example, which is of a consequence of lack of Indigenous management, which includes fire suppression in the United States. So many Indigenous groups have been prevented from doing their cultural burns on landscapes. And this has resulted in less diverse ecosystems, more severe wildfires, erosion, and lots of other damaging effects. This is a good map, and you can see Arizona on this map as well, where there's an increase in weeks with risk of very large fires, and this is projecting into the future. So we know, especially in California, where I center a lot of my work, cultural burns on the landscape are really, really important for reducing the risk of very large and damaging wildfires. And so that is one thing that we need to consider as we're considering the impacts of climate change, as we're facing more drought and more heat and potentially more wildfires. How can an Indigenous presence on the landscape help us maybe mitigate some of those risks? And again, I'm happy to share. I know these figures are pretty dense some of the time, so I'm happy to share this PowerPoint after if you would like to take a more detailed look at those. But for the history of fire suppression, it started really in the 1850s, and this is kind of central to California, where natives were outlawed from using their intentional burning on the landscape. And this law was also really harmful in that it provided for forced labor of Native Americans. And for most of the 20th century, this persisted until US federal fire policy focused on suppressing all fires in national forest until 1968, when that policy started to change. And then I would say within the last decade or so, we're seeing that change even more. And the loss of fire is really an example of how federal Indian policy has removed tribal people from their land, and therefore Indigenous land management. And I really want to emphasize that we have been impacting landscapes, and the landscapes that settlers found when they started to colonize America were not just by chance these really pristine and beautiful landscapes. Prior to settlement of colonizers on these landscapes, there was a strong influence of Indigenous land management to enhance productivity, to have healthy forests. And so much of federal policy over just the last few decades has been so harmful in removing that Indigenous presence on the landscape. So people are starting to think about how we can get back on the land, and there's this growing movement of land back. So I like to highlight sort of this evolution of Indigenous property rights in the US, from this early discovery and conversion of land to Indian title, treaties and removal, the allotment acts that broke our land up even further, reorganization. And then we're kind of getting into this modern era where so many of our lands are sort of this checkerboard status of lands, right? You might have federal next to private, next to tribal. So there's kind of this checkerboard status of our lands, which makes management of lands really challenging sometimes. And that's often where a lot of the evolution of Indigenous property rights stops. But I like to add this next chapter as well, which includes land back and self-governance, partnerships to be on the land, and more Indigenous self-determination. I think that's really important, and I think there is a bright future in that direction. But we have to consider how we're telling these stories, right, and how we are thinking about this. So these are not my maps, but the map on the right side or the left side of the screen shows the dispossession of Indigenous lands over time. And this tells a really sad story. It tells a story that many Indigenous people know well. We either know it personally or our ancestors lived it not too long ago. And that's a story that we all know and need to know. But I think that I'm a lot more interested and excited about the story that this map on the right tells of land back and lands that have been returned to Indigenous care. And this map just shows some within the last year or two. And there's even more happening. And this is important because the effects of land dispossession, this is a really awesome paper that was published in Science. The effects of land dispossession and the forced migration. My ancestors survived the Trail of Tears from southeastern United States to Oklahoma. And that forced dispossession and forced migration of Indigenous peoples' land in the United States has led to some interesting consequences. So I like this figure that shows you our historical land base versus present day, which is this very tiny dot. And then on that present day land, that land is more likely to have extreme heat and less precipitation than other land in the United States. So the land that we do retain is even more at risk for climate change factors. So that's why it's really important that we have access to our land and authority over our land and how it's being managed, so that we can be on the front lines of actively working towards mitigation of climate change effects and adaptation. So there's a number of different mechanisms for tribes to get land back. You can get ownership back or get stewardship access back. And approaches can really vary depending on the status, location, and size of a tribe. So we have federally recognized tribes as well as state and locally recognized tribes. If a tribe has more capital than another tribe, they might be able to buy land back, whereas other tribes might need to focus on stewardship agreements or land access agreements. But this is happening a lot. I've highlighted just a few cases that I find really exciting. Some of these are happening on a scale of 1 to 5 acres, and some of these are happening on the scale of 50,000 acres. So every little bit is important, and each tribe and each group has a different way that they are going about it. So now we need to talk about how we can increase that access. And I like to kind of break it up in thinking about, well, who owns the land? Who is managing the land right now? So I like to think about it in terms of federal, where we have national parks and forests, state and local. State parks are an example, private and corporate. So timber companies might be an example, or individual families, and then tribal land, where we have reservations, land held in trust, and then reacquired lands, as we're seeing in this movement. Some people are suggesting that one place to start might be returning the national parks to the tribes. So the national parks really had to kind of kick native people off the land in order to create the park system. And so there was this really inequitable process for how that was, how those were made. And these were also deemed like pristine, untouched landscapes when Native people had been living there all along. So that might be a place to start. And also, as Rose pointed out at the beginning of this, when she gave a land acknowledgement, land acknowledgements are not the same as land, right? And so I think land acknowledgements are important. We need to be able to acknowledge the land that we are on. If we can't do that, we don't have a very good starting place. But then we need to go beyond that and think, how can we work with our Native communities? How can we help give access to important landscapes or important plants and things like that? And so what comes next? And so this is really my call to action. You know, I know there's a lot of people from the city of Flagstaff in this room right now. And I think what tribes need and what Indigenous people need are really more federal, state, and local partnerships. And returning land to tribes shouldn't be conditional. There are a lot of benefits to Indigenous land management that I have mentioned, but we need to recognize the multitude of benefits beyond just environmental of returning the land. There's so many important cultural connections that we have with our landscapes that we need to be on the land to see those fulfilled. And so I think there's also a really important aspect of environmental justice here as well. And achieving any ambitious goals, whether it's conservation and climate change related or just environmental justice related, will require acknowledging the significant role that the first stewards of these lands have had in contributing to the health of ecosystems, as well as the health of our communities in general. And so I really want to leave you with that and to think about ways that you or your city could be working more with tribes to ensure access to land base. And so that's where I'm going to leave off. Again, I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end, but for now I'm going to turn it over to Kaylee. Kaylee, do you want me to keep progressing the slides?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's best.
Okay,
Cool.
great.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, McKeely. That was awesome. I've done some great presentations like PowerPoints and stuff, but Indigenous Peoples Day is always a really big and busy day for all of us. I'm the leader of one of the biggest organizations on campus. We planned a protest last minute. Like, there's just so much that we've been doing. So it's a little bit simplified on my end, but I think I'm really good at oral storytelling and stuff like that as a strength anyways. So yeah, I think we can, this is good. So when I asked a lot of my Indigenous, my relatives, my peers, what I should speak about, given, a platform like this, such a rare opportunity, a lot of them, you know, demanded that I talk about some uncomfortable truths that I think Flagstaff needs to hear. And I don't want to say like colonizers in general, like these are my generation. I think we're pretty angry. I think we're a little bit always tired and frustrated. So you want to hear from us, this is what you're going to hear. So first and foremost, there's a lot of hypocrisy that comes with celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day in this colonial society that is the United States, where this day isn't even recognized across the country. You know, how can we show solidarity with our Indigenous relatives if we can't even, you know, recognize this day as something that belongs to us? Just one day. And I'll give Flagstaff some credit in that. I think they do, you know, I can see the effort in working with the Indigenous population here. I've seen it more here than in places like, you know, anywhere down in the valley and stuff like that. I definitely feel that support in that community here. So I'll give Flagstaff some credit on that end, but of course there's always something more that we could be doing. So there is a lot of hypocrisy that comes with this, and I think it's important that we recognize that, because it seems like by celebrating this or by honoring our youth but refusing to do more than this, it just feels like Indigenous people should be comfortable at a certain level instead of, you know, truly getting like reparations and everything like that. And second of all, a lot of people wanted me to talk about Flagstaff's support of Snowball, and Snowball being on the San Francisco Peaks or Ilk Sleet. In my language, it's one of my sacred mountains, and the best comparison that we could give to you guys is if it's as if somebody put a resort on top of let's pick something biblical, you know, where like I don't know. I'm not, you know, I'm not very religious, but some, you know, in it's like that's how important it is to us. Like, and just to see this constant, you know, it goes back to that hypocrisy of, yes, we do care about you and we want to show our support for you, but then you still continue to support something like this and profit off of it. You know, it makes me very angry. It's even if you want to disregard, you know, the impact it has on us and the tribes that consider this mountain sacred, you're still not considering the environmental impact that that place has on that mountain. And you know, lastly, I think the next big one is Indigenous injustice in Flagstaff. A lot of the people that I work with, you know, in these grassroots organizations, we often do run into a lot of discrimination from places or, you know, things like Flagstaff PD, or when we see our unsheltered relatives out there suffering in this brutal winter, you know, like this is something that we need to address more. We bring it up time and time again, but you know, this time, you know, you will hear this again. Like, we're going to keep demanding that we get justice for our Indigenous relatives, you know, until we can see it, until we feel comfortable with what we have. Go to the next slide. So I'm very big on decolonization as a solution, and I highlighted these four as like the main points that I think it really highlights how it works. So when it comes to the MMIW epidemic, or the missing and murdered Indigenous women or missing and murdered Indigenous relatives epidemic, it's literally classified as a crisis by the Department of the Interior. And Flagstaff being a border town to, you know, different reservations, including my own, like the Navajo reservation, it makes people like me, Indigenous women and Indigenous relatives, Indigenous, you know, non-cisgendered Indigenous relatives, it makes us all, we're a very vulnerable population here. So, you know, when we think about decolonization as a solution, that leads to like, you know, we think about how, like, what does that mean? And we know that pre-colonial lifestyles of Indigenous people resulted in very rare cases of violence against women, with some tribes even having reverence and respect for women and non-cisgendered individuals. And societies like my own, like the Dene, being matriarchal, where we've had women in leadership positions. So, you know, decolonization plays a big part in solving the MMIW epidemic. And also, like McKaylee mentioned earlier, when we seek to protect, these places from extractive industries, we also, that's also a solution to the MMIW epidemic. Because places, when we build pipelines and when we desecrate these sacred sites, that brings in things like man camps and transient workers who can't be punished by the tribe and who often get away with hurting, our relatives. Next of all is unsheltered relatives, like I mentioned before. Big point, nobody was homeless before colonization and capitalism. And to this day, the efforts that I see from my my comrades, my peers, my Indigenous peers, consistently and tirelessly working to support our unsheltered relatives, there's nothing like it, and that decolonization plays a big role into that, as well as like culturally competent care when we work with our unsheltered relatives. And next up is like environmental catastrophe. Like McKaylee just talked about all of this, and I can, she talked about how Indigenous stewardship quite literally protects the planet. And my generation is very, very uncertain of our future. And a remark that I've heard that is just so heartbreaking is that we don't know if we'll ever reach elder status, like the people that we look up to, and this language and this culture we're trying to revitalize is any of it worth it if we don't have a future to look forward to continue to teach our children? There's a lot of there's an Indigenous proverb that says that we're borrowing the earth from our future children and our future grandchildren. So that's how decolonization plays into that. Decolonization plays into it by like, land back, the land back movement. And it's more than just, the land back movement is more than just giving us some of it. A lot of it is, completely giving back the land to us. And sorry, McKaylee, the presentation is off of the screens. I don't know if you could put that back up. Okay. Can you guys hear me okay? I'm getting a notification that you can't hear me that well.
We can hear you, but I think McKaylee was dropped.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and get a hold of her and see if she's able to.
Okay. Yeah, I can continue speaking
Okay.
even without the slide on the screen. Lastly,
Okay.
the fourth point that I had was like discrimination, like I mentioned again, and decolonization plays into that, regarding like education and reducing Indigenous stereotypes and stigma. A lot of that literally helps keep Indigenous people safe. It reduces and prevents hate crimes. And I think a lot of people don't realize that something like even changing like a mascot that plays a big part into how people see us, and I don't think people realize that decolonization is kind of what that is, if you could call it that. And so my last slide was a call to action. I had some really cool pictures, but maybe if McKaylee comes back soon, we can look at them. But I'll just read down the list. So my call to action for anybody listening, especially Flagstaff city officials, similarly to McKaylee, is to work closely with Indigenous people here. I'm a part of many different organizations, and I would really like to see some more support from the city of Flagstaff, and truly show that you care the way that you say you care, and hold Snowball accountable. Personally, I'd like to see it gone. I know it's like a very big thing to say, and a lot of people get mad when you tell them, I don't like you playing in this reclaimed snow on my sacred mountain. People get mad about that. They don't like to hear that, but it has to be said. You should hold Snowball accountable. You should hold Flagstaff PD accountable, and you should hold our politicians accountable. Like, for example, right now, the Indian Child Welfare Act is a hot topic. Everybody's talking, about protecting that, especially after what we saw happened with Roe v. Wade. So your support means a lot to us. Please don't let Indigenous people be the only people speaking for ourselves. We truly need solidarity with non-Indigenous people. Help us defend what's sacred, and provide more funding for Indigenous causes, and provide us with Indigenous spaces. An example of this could be like the Thorpe Park Annex. Yes, I'm very happy that the Indigenous Cultural Community Center is being implemented in this plan, but there were also plans of having like Indigenous gardens and Indigenous community gardens for us to have access to our traditional, medicinal, culturally significant plants, as well as like food that's significant to us, and ways that we can take care of each other with such a space like that. Personally, I think we deserve it. I think we're owed it. And it's so tiring to constantly have, our youth having to spend their time just tirelessly just devoting ourselves to advocating for spaces like this, when it really shouldn't even be up for debate. And lastly, I ask you to support us every day, not just today, but every day. Because I think today, I think people like to think that this is just the one time where you'll hear from us, you'll see from us, and you get to help us with stuff. But please, like, we're still here all the time. We need your help constantly and consistently. Yeah, so I don't know if McKaylee is back yet, or if she could share anything that was on the slides.
Kelly, I don't think she's back yet. She said she emailed and said she was having some Wi-Fi issues. So she's
Okay.
trying to get back in, just to let you know.
Okay. I don't know if there's a way that I can share my screen. Do you know?
I think you can. Try it and see if you can. I don't know if you can, but just try.
Yeah. Okay. How is this?
Oh, we can
You
see
guys
that.
this? All right, cool. So yeah, so here's like the pictures that I included about, I think it really showcases what our
Can-
Indigenous youth look like, or what they're up to.
Can you, Kelly,
Mhm.
can you go ahead and make that a slide presentation?
Yeah, yeah.
So it can be bigger.
Let's see. I'm not familiar with Google Slides like at all. So if any of you know how,
I think
oh, here it is.
McKaylee's not.
Okay, well, I've got it open already. So yeah, so here's what I think kind of showcases what our Indigenous youth in Flagstaff are up to. So this is the NAU Council of Indigenous Ambassadors, of whom I am a president of. This was us at our showcase last November, where I received the title. And since this picture, it's grown by like, 5 times. There's so many new students at each of our meetings, and all of them are just so passionate about getting to work in their community. And it's so inspiring. And I hope that you can help us with, what we're trying to accomplish too, which is creating like a solidarity with other populations on campus, like the Black Student Union or the Latino Student Union, and really kind of bringing together the Indigenous community here at NAU. And quite frankly, like, I don't mean to brag, but I haven't seen an Indigenous community quite so close any other university than here personally. And I'm very proud of that. I think that the students here have put in a lot of work to achieve that. And then this picture up here is me and a couple members of Aba Yala, which is another Indigenous club here on campus. Yes, I thought it was pretty cool. I like the way Machias to the side of me has his fist raised. It's so inspiring and impactful to see. I hope to you guys to see what our youth look like and what they're doing, to really give an image to everything that I'm saying. And then this picture down here is from when I was doing my research on Indigenous gardens over the summer in hopes of bringing one to NAU for our Indigenous students. And my shirt is the Navajo phrase for lumberjack. It's really cool. Like, NAU has that. I think that's really cool. And then lastly, I wanted to just kind of bring up some stuff that our Indigenous youth are up to in the community. So on this side is the Council of Indigenous Ambassadors t-shirt and hoodie fundraiser. So this is one of our logos. I currently have, it's the logo of the ambassador medallion, which I'm wearing now, and I can show you guys after. But it will be printed on a black t-shirt or a black hoodie, whichever you prefer. And all proceeds go to helping us, like I said, continue building this Indigenous community on campus. And like in November, Indigenous Heritage Month, we're planning an awareness week leading up to the next ambassador showcase. And our students want to talk about residential schools and the MMIW epidemic and domestic violence and stuff like that. So I really hope that you all choose to support us in this way. And then this was a little bit last minute, but me and a couple of the other Latine clubs on campus organized this Indigenous Peoples Day March, which is today at 4 p.m. We would like to meet on the NAU Union Pedway. And I hope you can bring your posters and your voices as we march to the Flagstaff City Hall lawn, where we will, talk about awareness for Indigenous causes. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I had to add. If you attend this Indigenous Peoples Day March, I'm planning on doing a prayer before we all march, and I'm really looking forward to that. So I hope, you all can at least participate in that. Yeah, I would really like to emphasize how our youth are just so tirelessly working. I don't know if you can still see me on camera, but a lot of students and I last night were chalking messages on sidewalks about today, important things that we thought were important. Like the Navajo phrase, "Adi ko honiglo," which literally means we are still here. It's a phrase that I first heard when I visited the Treaty of 1868 at the Navajo Nation Museum in 2018. After you go through, hearing about the long walk and how my people came home, after you go through that entire exhibit, on the wall was the phrase "Adi ko honiglo," and it said underneath it, "We are still here." And it was just so moving and impactful. And I use that phrase on days like this, Indigenous Peoples Day or Residential School Awareness Day or MMIW Day, that phrase, I use it all the time. It means so much to me. But yeah, my hands and my knees are bruised and scraped up from writing these messages and building this community and trying to raise hope and awareness. It's tiring, and any and all support, we could really use it. And I'm so happy that I got the opportunity to tell you guys about this. On behalf of our youth, I'm so happy that I get to be their voice for this. That concludes my part of the presentation. Yeah, so I don't know if McKaylee's back, but we can take some questions now if you'd like.
Yes, I'm back. I apologize for the technical difficulties, everyone, but I was able to rejoin. And thank you for your beautiful words, Kaylee, and perspectives. But yes, happy to take questions now.
Okay, anybody have questions? If you can just unmute and ask your question, or if you want, you can put it in the chat so we can read it. But there are a couple of, let's see, comments. Miss Alibi said, "Good job, Callie. I appreciate your words and presentation."
Thank you.
And then our council member House said, "Thank you, Callie, for your powerful words and all the tireless efforts to raise awareness and bring meaningful change to our community."
Yeah.
The Councilmember Shimoni, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi, Rose. Good morning. Yate bene. I
Oh,
just
good
wanted to
job.
say, thank you. Just wanted to say thank you, Callie, so much for sharing and all the team's work. McKaylee, I think what you're doing is incredible. I hope to meet you in person soon at City Hall and discuss some ideas as to how we can further the good work that you all are working on. But it's just incredible to hear the things you're working on, and it's inspiring. So keep up the good work, and we're grateful to have you in our community, and grateful to have you being engaged and speaking up and passionate. I so appreciate it, and humbled by what you and the team have been doing. We got a lot of work to do, but we'll discuss more. But just wanted to say thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Councilmember Shimoni. Councilmember Shimoni is our city council liaison to our Indigenous Commission. So I appreciate his words and his guidance in a lot of the efforts that we're doing. And I think just having city council bring and see the commission has been a big step towards working on a lot of the things that that our Indigenous community has brought forward. And so that has been a really good, of course, a lot of things are still in motion. There's things internally that we're working on with city staff. So there's just a lot going on, a lot of moving pieces. And I know that sometimes it's not always easy or have the time to share out, but there are good things happening. Being a city staff person, I can see that and I hear it, and I have people asking how they can help in some of the things that my office is doing. So I can't, things are going to move slow in some of the really tougher issues, but I know that some of the other things are moving, such as the visibility on Indigenous public art. Those are things that are moving forward, and just just having even this public participation piece for the Thorpe Annex Park. would not even have been on the table, or even in the process of public participation, if our Indigenous community did not step up and say, we need this, we need something. And so that got it moving. So just want to give you a little bit of some of the things that have been moving. And Callie, I really, really appreciate you bringing youth to the table, to voicing some of those some of the input that we needed for the Thorpe Park parcel. So just wanted to let you know that. Let's see here. There's a couple more things. Michael says, thank you both, McKaylee and Kaylee, for both of your presentations and ideas for how to advocate. And then Sharon Doctor from NAU said, thank you to both you and Kaylee and McKaylee and Kaylee for your wisdom and passion for your people and Indigenous relatives. So I think when Kelly brings up the point of, give us the funding, help us with these things, I don't think she is saying that from the standpoint of a handout. I think she's saying that on the side of, let's work together, help us to, develop some things that we seem to be spinning our wheels on. How do we get that started? How do we, those who know how the system works, help us to get into the system and help us to make it work for us. So I think those are some things that are really important to understand when it comes to requesting help and asking for assistance. Let's see. And then Linda Curley, she's from she's one of the she's on the advisory council for Indigenous Peoples Advisory Council for the Board of Supervisors. So she says to keep up the good work. And then Councilmember Salas says, originally from the Philippines, overcoming centuries of colonization, I'm the first Asian American with Hispanic heritage elected on Flagstaff City Council and speaking for defending Mother Earth and the sacred elements. So she's been so very helpful in that way, and I really appreciate her support. And then she says, in my individual and official capacity, I am with you all on speaking for defending Mother Earth and the sacred elements. And then our president from Navajo Nation is here also. Great job on the presentation by our youth leaders, Najona, he says. And since we're kind of
but thank you, President Nez.
if you want, we can give a few minutes to the president before we say good day, and we'll see you at 11. Would that be okay? And I know some of the people online here may not be able to join us at the 11 o'clock time. So President Nez, Shiche, would you be willing, he's my grandfather by clan, would you go ahead and say a few words to our audience here? Yeah.
All right, thank you. I hope you all can hear me. Doyat shitsu do anhalchen inat ani ado Mayor Paul DC. Thank you for recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day with your council members here in the city of Flagstaff. Rose, thanking you for being a strong advocate for all our Native American brothers and sisters in the city of Flagstaff. And Kaylee and McKaylee, thank you for those words. Very encouraging, and to know that we are going to be in good hands in the future. You are our leaders now. I know a lot of folks say you're our future leaders, but as we heard in the presentations, you're leading us now. So you don't hear then he need a lesson. I don't Dyson of Tagi, a shing ancient of Tratness, neighbor shing to the cheat that should cheat or touchy need a shanala. So, with my brothers and sisters from the Navajo nations, I greet you in our native tongue. You know, this morning I was interviewed by KTAR. They were asking me about the significance of Indigenous Peoples Day. You know, it sounds like it's a current movement, but this movement has been happening since Columbus came across the ocean, right? I had to say that. Let's get the record straight. Columbus didn't discover America, right? We were already here, Indigenous peoples. And I say that with all due respect because we have to be able to rewrite history. And that's what our leaders were talking about today. And the professionals there at Northern Arizona University, universities all across the country, you know, putting our perspective, our worldview on paper so that we can push back on, you know, this misconception. This land wasn't, um, let me put it this way, this land was inhabited by our people since time immemorial. And we are continuing to warrior up, right? We have some awesome warriors, and of course our lady warriors that are on the WebEx or Zoom or this video feed here today, and on all across the country. You know, that's what we're fighting for. And I also mentioned in the interview that I hope this Indigenous Day 2022, it also shows the strength and the resilience of our people, right? We've gone through a very difficult time, two years of COVID, and we were number one in the country in COVID positive cases. But we were able to turn it around because we followed and honored our frontline warriors and lady warriors, following directions, supporting them. Yeah, we had some pretty tough protocols in place, but as a tribal nation, we have the ability to govern ourselves, and we use that. I know some people didn't like it, but you know, we were able to use that inherent sovereignty to keep our people safe. Yeah, I recognize we lost a lot of our Navajo people, our Indigenous people all across the country. But we are comforted to know that we will one day see them again with the Creator. And until then, we still have a job to do as five-finger beings, right? You shared with us your heart, and I appreciate that. I can tell it wasn't scripted, it was from the heart. And that's what leadership is all about. And I appreciate it. I don't want to take too much time, but again, to the city of Flagstaff, thank you for giving me the time to join you for Indigenous Peoples Day, Flagstaff, Arizona. And we will be coming over at 11 and then transitioning down to Phoenix for the that event this afternoon as well. So God bless everyone, and thank you again for all the presentations and the leadership of the city of Flagstaff as well. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I'm trying to coordinate other things too for the date. So for being here. Thank you for our sheroes that have presented on some things that we really needed to hear. And I know that our leaders are listening on this call and on this virtual platform. So yeah, for all the things that you presented. We'll go ahead and end here and then resume. For those of you who are not at City Hall or within City Hall in a close proximity, this will give you time to come down for the 11 o'clock portion of the presentations. So there'll be 2 youth panels there for the 11 o'clock session. So just want to let you know, thank you again for everything.
Thank you all so much for coming and for the opportunity. My email was on the slides. Happy to share slides or talk further. And thank you, President Nez, for being here and for your words. I appreciate.
Yeah, as well. I'm very glad that you all invited me to be here. McKaylee, I think we should put, our contact info in the chat in case any of you would like to reach out to us for anything. Even if it's volunteer work, please absolutely let me know. I'd be more than happy to do it. And I'll hope to see you guys at 11. So yeah, again.
All right, everybody have a great, great day.